Hello, everybody. I'm back with the next presentation, and we are still focusing on how to read or approach a scientific paper. And today I'm going to talk about why it is so important that we should follow excellent quality literature. And this is an important topic because many people do not realize that poor quality literature does not necessarily add to scientific knowledge, and in some cases, or depending upon what sort of literature one follows, it basically is counterproductive. It is not productive because it makes one think of evidence in a way that is not necessarily a good quality evidence. So let's get started. Just to recap a few points from the last talk, and I explained there in that talk that there are thousands of journals available now, and so many journals have cropped up over the last 10 to 15 years, coinciding with when the developing countries started making it mandatory that the academicians need to publish to get promotions or get pay increments and stuff like that. So that created a lot of market opportunity, and a lot of predatory journals will basically publish. They get money from the author to publish their publication, and they don't necessarily focus on the quality because that's their business. And the scientific community itself now has recognized thousands of journals that are basically predatory journals, and they're predatory in the sense that they are compromising the quality for the sake of money. And because there are now so many of them, so overall, when we look at the number of publications that are becoming available every month or every year, a huge bulk of them, or majority of them, are basically low quality studies. And number of years ago, when I started noticing this, I personally made a goal for myself that I will only stick with publishing, reading, and reviewing for the top 20% of the journals in my field. And so that's what I have been doing. I've only published in the journals that are very high quality. And I recall one manuscript that was not accepted by one high quality journal. I sent it to another high quality journal, and they also declined it. And that manuscript would have been easily published in a mediocre journal, but I decided not to even bother with that. And because I realized after getting feedback from two high quality journals that is not good science. It was not good science, so I discarded that manuscript. And how we identify the top 20% of top quality journals, I'll briefly mention that in my talks as we move along, and I'll probably talk at some length in the next talk about it. But the point here is that unless we focus on we follow the high quality journals, we are likely not to understand science, and we are going to get misinformed about science. Now, just to make a small correction about myself, I do periodically review for mediocre journals as well, because I keep getting invitations from them, unless I block them from email, to review for them. So periodically, when I have time, I'll just say accept that offer, because I do want to chip in to build some average quality journals as well, and for my own experience sake as well. So why it is important and how good quality scientific studies or publications differentiate themselves from poor quality or low quality material in terms of scientific impact. There are two aspects that we need to understand for that. And one is about the publication itself, and one is about the review process or the editorial process. So on this slide, I'm going to briefly explain some of the variables. I personally use, depending upon the article, as much as 12 or 13 variables when I review a manuscript. But I highlighted some of the major ones here, and I'll try to explain how poor quality literature can be misinformative. So in terms of introduction, a good quality manuscript will be very precise. And I'm going to use an example of CBT in patients with depression who have somatic features. This is not about CBT in depression. This is not about CBT in depressed patients. This is about CBT in depressed patients who have predominant somatic features. So if this is a manuscript, a good quality manuscript will focus on, in their introduction, will focus on this specific topic. Not about CBT, what CBT is, who introduced it, how much studies have shown that CBT is good for depression, because that's irrelevant. That's not pertinent to this paper. But in a poor quality manuscript, you will see a lot of discussion, random discussion about CBT and depression, historical discussion about what CBT is, who introduced it, and all that stuff. And in that process, that is basically reflective of two things. One is the authors basically don't know the literature that already exists specifically to this topic of CBT in depression with somatization. So they are just they're just picking up random material in their introduction. And the second thing is, if there are 10 or 15 good quality studies that have been done on this topic specifically, they will miss those studies in their introduction. They will only cite, if there are 6 good quality studies, they might only make a reference to 1. So you're not learning a whole lot. You're basically just getting a historical recap. Sample size can be an issue, a huge issue, and I'll give you an example. A number of years ago, I came across a study from one of the developing countries, and the title was prevalence of hypertension, or something like this. Prevalence of hypertension at a national level. When I download the full study, I realized that in this huge country, they are talking about a sample size of 900 individuals. Even though they picked those 900 individuals from like 20 different areas of the country, but based on the size of this country, a national representation of hypertension sample would be in tens of thousands of individuals. So it was a misleading study. And we will see that a lot when we're dealing with the low quality journals or low quality material. Randomization can be a huge issue. Similarly, controlling the variables in low quality studies, you will not see that all the variables are robustly controlled. And that is what good quality journals will do. The good quality studies will have to control the variables in a robust manner, and that's why they will have sometimes very strict, well-defined inclusion and exclusion criteria. And because of the exclusion criteria, the major drawback will be that the study they will not be able to generalize the study. But if they had not put those strict exclusion criteria in place, then the whole study would have become irrelevant, because the exclusion criteria screen out a lot of variables and screen out a lot of things that would have impacted the study findings. And if you can't control them, you have to basically exclude them. And an example would be, going back to the topic that I said I'll use an example, if someone does have Crohn's disease, and you are not excluding that from the study of CBT in patient with depression and somatization, then you are basically not doing a good study. Like you're not controlling the variables. Or somebody really have a heart disease and they are having periods of chest pain, and how are you determining that their pain is not a feature of their angina? So you have to control the variables in a very robust manner. And in poor quality studies, you will see that element often gets ignored. Then measures and statistics. And the measures is something that, again, many poor quality studies, poor quality journals, they'll publish these poor quality studies who are not using good quality measures. And in a simple example, I've explained to people that a measure is basically has to be very standardized. Like what we call as 1 kilogram is a standardized measure. So 1 kilogram is the same whether it is in Canada, US, Pakistan, India, any country, Russia, you pick a country, 1 kilogram is 1 kilogram because it has been standardized against a certain measure. But if we say that this material is, if you buy something and it is, say, 20 bucks per kilogram, you know you're buying 1 kilogram for 20 bucks. But if someone says, okay, you buy this 20 kilograms and you'll pay 20 bucks for this measure that is that person's own measure, how do you know that you are buying good quality? And that is what happens when we use poor quality measures, whether we are assessing depression or features of depression or anxiety or PTSD, or if we are measuring, for that matter, if we are measuring blood sugars or diabetes, if you're not using standardized measures, then that quality is vulnerable to poor quality results, and it is likely to become a poor quality study. In terms of the literature, we have to balance between what supports your study and what doesn't support your study. But when we look at, often when I look at the poor quality studies, in their discussion, they will focus on all the literature that supports their studies, and there will be equal amount of literature that doesn't support their study. They will not mention it. They will not discuss it. So anybody reading that poor quality manuscript now will be leaving that, after reading that, will think, oh, this is wonderful study, because there are so many studies, other studies that basically support this study. But that person will not realize there were tens of other studies that didn't support this study, but the authors decided not to discuss those studies, and the reviewing process didn't identify this big gap or that big problem in this manuscript, so the manuscript got published. Then the similar matter is with the references, that in good quality studies, the references are very pertinent. And as I mentioned in the beginning, that if it's a study on CBT in depressed patients with somatic symptoms, then the authors will be citing those studies specifically, but a poor quality study will cite all sort of CBT literature in that study. In fact, in a recent review that I decided to do for an average quality journal, and basically I did it because I'll mention it again in the next slide, because that study was only sent out for review for two reviewers only. So, and one reviewer said rejected, one said major revision, so they wanted a third opinion as a tiebreaker. But in this study, this was a simple review, very basic topic in terms of the review, and it was 40 double-spaced pages of review, but the authors have cited 300 plus references for it. They basically, they found whatever paper that had a title or an abstract that seemed to fit in their manuscript, they just fitted it in. And that's again a poor quality material. So overall, good quality studies, they will add to the value of science, innovation, understanding of a subject matter, new strategies for innovation or care or discovery, whereas poor quality studies or low quality studies will not have that sort of value. And if you continue to follow poor quality studies, you cannot become globally competitive in terms of the science and discovery. The second important aspect of what differentiates or how poor quality literature gets published or might get published is that the editorial process. A good editorial process has expert editors who have themselves published a lot, who have themselves reviewed a lot, and when a manuscript comes to the reviewing board, to the editorial board, an editor with the right kind of expertise will pick it up, go through it, and see whether it even needs to be sent out to the reviewers or not. But in a poor quality journal, they may not have good quality editors in terms of expertise. They might not have expert editors who have expertise specific to that topic. So this step gets missed. Or in a real poor quality journals, really poor quality journals who are just vested in making money, they might even ignore this process, or the editor will simply say, okay, it looks good, yeah, it's fine, the topic is good, so they will just simply send it out to the reviewers. Now, once it gets to the reviewers, there are several elements of the reviewing process itself that will differentiate between a poor quality manuscript and a good quality manuscript. And I'll just highlight three of them. And one is whether that journal has access to a reviewer with topic-specific expertise. So if they don't, they will send to a general expert or somebody who doesn't have expertise. And if the reviewer doesn't have expertise, of course, he's going to just do just an overview or just a quick look at that review and send the manuscript back with his or her comments. An example, again, going back to CBT in depressed patients with somatic symptoms, if the journal has to send that article out to someone who has expertise in CBT in depressed patients with somatization or somatic symptoms. But if the journal cannot find such a person, then they will send it out to somebody who has expertise or know about CBT in depression in general. And that's a huge difference in terms of expertise. Now, the second important step is factor is the number of reviewers. Good quality review journals will send out a manuscript usually to 3, 4, or 5 reviewers. And usually that's 4, and sometimes it's 5. And so 4 or 5 reviewers who have expertise specific to the topic that is being discussed in the manuscript. Reviewing a manuscript is very different from 2 reviewers reviewing a manuscript who have non-specific general knowledge about the title of the manuscript. And so that's another level of compromise or level of lowering the level of quality. And the third one is the quality of the review itself. And because I've reviewed for good quality journals for 20 plus years, and I've periodically reviewed for average quality journals as well, on that experience, I can basically tell you that in good quality reviews, most of the reviewers will send back comments that are at least a page, sometimes page and a half, and occasionally over 2 pages long. But in average quality journals, usually the reviewers will send back reviews or comments that are sometimes half a page or most times less than a page. And the reason again is because they may not have the necessary expertise at the time, or they don't have that level of expertise with that data specifically, and also because the journal is not looking for reviewers that can dismiss all those manuscripts, because those journals need to publish some material. So both these elements will compromise certain manuscripts, and those manuscripts will still get published, and they will come across as a poor quality literature. But And now we have thousands of journals publishing that quality of literature. And if it's a country where academicians follow poor quality literature and don't make an effort to improve that, and effort is not only improving what quality of literature you follow, it's also because I was an academician in Pakistan before I moved here. In fact, the first journal that I was on the editorial board of was in Pakistan. So I understand the process over there as well. And I've followed the process over the last 20 years in developing countries as well as the developed countries. In developed countries, there are at least 10, 15, or as much as 20% academicians who have keen interest in their area of practice or expertise or academics. And many of them will read as many as 10, 15, 20, 30 full articles in a month. And they will browse through another 20, 30, 50 abstracts in a month as well. Many of them subscribe to high quality journals. They get the list of the every week or month, they get what the journal is publishing in their feeds or emails. So they will go through the email and the abstracts as a part of their routine. Whereas in developing countries, you don't find such sort of academicians. They basically don't read as much. And then, so if those sort of academicians continue with that sort of trend for years after years, after 10, 15 years, they have trainees, then they train the next generation in the same manner. And many from that next generation develop the same sort of trend, habit, and practices and expertise. And they then keep on continue that cycle. And because many developing countries have stayed in that cycle for over the last century, that's why they lag behind. That's an important reason why they lag behind. With more common availability of internet, more common availability of scientific literature from even good quality, high quality journals, the trend has been changing, and new young generation academicians are developing a sense that they need to improve their level of expertise and how they approach scientific literature so they can develop better skills and they can follow better academic path that is globally competitive. And that's the group I'm trying to target. And my academic efforts, my videos, my posts in the Facebook are geared to attract this group. And obviously there is a middle group as well that doesn't find enough time to break away from this red cycle group, and then they're already 5, 7, 8 years into their practices, into their routine, academic routine. Now they have their family, they have to support their family, so they don't have the time or effort or resources to swim against the tide. I'm trying to capture those who are willing to put an effort to swim against the tide. And if you are interested, you follow my talks and I'm sure you will learn a point or two. That's where this talk ends. And I have 3 more talks on this topic, and then we will start posting articles, high quality articles in the Facebook group so that we can have some academic discussion. Thank you very much. Bye.